Hello everyone, and welcome to another Gear Talk. We do this every other Thursday at 5 o'clock. Welcome everybody. Today, we're going to talk about some fun stuff today, and we're going to talk about the worst games in the series of Gears of War. Yay! Woo! Everyone's favorite subject. Actually, if you're online arguing about this, apparently it is, because I had to look this up to see if this idea has already been done before. A lot of people have talked about what the worst game in the franchise is, and we're going to be looking at two of them today and seeing which one is the worst out of both of them. I'm talking obviously about Gears of War Judgment and also Gears 5. So the amount of hate these games get. Now here's the thing, disclaimer right away. So just because these games in the Gears of War franchise are considered bad doesn't make them bad games. It's just compared to everything in Gears of War, these don't hold up like the test of time. They don't stack up to being as good. Some of them have aged poorly. Some of them haven't aged at all. They're just bad. So we're just going to talk about them as Gears of War games for being bad. Now as actual games, they're actually very good games. If you compare them like game by game basis to other franchises, they're not bad. But if you compare them to the other games that came before, like Gears 2, Gears 3, even Tactics in there, and even 4, those games don't stand up to these. So we're going to talk about Judgment and 5 and see which one is truly the worst by a category basis. I decided not to do any lights today because I figured, we're talking about the worst games in the franchise. Do we need lights for this? I feel like the dishonorable, the stuff that we want to talk about that oh no, not good games, maybe no lights at all, just to be oh no, they don't deserve lights. That's, I don't know, maybe that's the shtick we'll go with. Starting off in all the categories, I have a few of them listed, and we're just going to go down one by one. Nothing really particular or crazy for them, just saying which is better than the other. And starting off, let's just talk about the main reason people really tune into these games, story. So, the stories for both of these games and which one is better. Putting these games side by side, it really does seem like with Judgment, it's really cookie cutter to be it's just like the other Gears of War games, just a different story, different characters. And then you look at 5, which is kind of like a worldwide adventure of going to other continents. Now, when I look at these two, I have to ask myself, looking at them in a Gears of War aspect, which one is a better story in general? And I kind of lead more towards Judgment because of the fact that Judgment, yeah, it's a bit cookie cutter and it's we've seen this story before, the same way it's done. It's just the story itself, the story of Halvo Bay and the story of going against Karn. It's very interesting to see how our characters deal with this situation, with all of them from different backgrounds coming together to deal with this threat 6 weeks after E-Day, the earliest until E-Day that's going to be released, the earliest we've ever had in the series. While we have Gears 5, which really is, I'm not going to lie, just like I said, worldwide, it's all over the place. The story takes you to different areas altogether, and that's not the greatest thing sometimes. For instance, you start off in Azura, then you're being thrown over into New Hope, then you get tossed all the way over into Vaskar. You're kind of just thrown everywhere. And it doesn't work that well because the flow of the stories in Gears of War work well when it's linear progression. Now, yes, 5 did open world, and I love open world, but it didn't have the right feel to it. After you finish one area, hey, it's all gone, we're going somewhere all together, so hope you did what you wanted. And I just don't feel that. Also, the story of with Kate and figuring out the origin of the Locust, yeah, that would normally be really great and fine. It's just, it feels like sometimes they really fumbled what they were trying to do when telling that story. When they got to the actual meat of those stories, it was pretty good. But in Judgment, you really get the feeling of yeah, we're going through, we're taking on Karn, we gotta prep and get ready. And yeah, there are some sidelines you end up going through, for instance, going through Seahorse Hills and all of that stuff. Sometimes it really does feel man, are we really on an adventure here, or we're just sightseeing Halvo Bay? But it still did feel like the story at least is something I was compelled to see to the end. With 5, I was I'm not really that invested to see the ending because this really is just a tour de Serra that we're doing here. So I really do give the edge to Judgment in this regard. Next up, talking about the characters that really make the story drive forward. The characters that are really the things that you invest in to see how their tale comes to an end in these stories. You have Kilo Squad, which is comprised basically of Barrick, Cole, Paddock, and Sophia. And then over on the 5 side, there's not really a main group you play with the entire way home, but if we had to say the cast we're looking at Kate, JD, you have Jack, you have Dell, you have Foz, and I really don't feel like putting like Barrett or Marcus or any of them in here because they're just sidelined. But you have like the newer generation that are going through and trying to solve the problems from the armies of the past that their forefathers or their last generation fought. And if I really had to say, it's really an easy answer for this one. Kilo Squad kind of just wins because the fact that Kilo, you've got Barrett in it, you've got Cole in it, characters that we've known very well throughout the entire franchise, and they're kept the same as we always have them. A little bit different for Baird because of the fact that he's not as like bullheaded or kind of an ass like he normally is, but it's nice to see a younger Baird and how he reacted to being in charge of a squad. You got Paddock introduced, and Paddock was amazing the first time he was ever introduced. You have characters like Sophia, which kind of play a backer role to things, but still not that bad. Some side characters get are like Loomis. Loomis is pretty fun. The ending of Judgment is pretty fun when he comes back into the fray. And then over on the 5 side of things, you know, you've got Kate, which everyone already knows my view on Kate. I'm not a fan. I never have been. You have Dell, who really doesn't get anything at all for his character until like the last third of Gears 5, and that's other than that, he's just always like the background friend that's cracking a joke. There's nothing to him really. JD's story in 5 is actually really good. He has a full redemption he goes through. I like that. Foz I actually am okay with because Foz I saw as having like the story with how it was going through his was just like he's an asshole, but he slowly works his way into the group and he's kind of like, you know, a part of the crew. I kind of like that. I thought it really worked well for him. And then Jack is just Jack, just upgraded and cool. But yeah, out of both of them, just Kilo Squad wins because the characters were nice, the interactions were nice. You got to see how everyone, like Paddock being Grozny, how he reacted with the cog. I thought it was good. I thought it was very nice. I thought it drove well for Kilo. I thought it was a good grouping of characters. And then in 5, it just didn't feel like they were a cohesive unit until like the very, very end. And I'm not talking like they came together and they resolved their differences, which they did. It just didn't feel like they were really all on the same page by the end. It just didn't feel right. Some of the characters really just aren't great. Like Kate just isn't a good character in general. So I felt that really took away a lot of points from making this game something it really could have been. So yeah, I have to give that one to Judgment also for having the better characters introduced. Next up, we have everyone's favorite. We have multiplayer. I don't even have to explain a lot of things. 5 gets multiplayer. 5 just gets it off the bat. You have Judgment, who changed so much of what they had. They took out the Locust enemies altogether, so you could only play with COG skins in the game. It was abysmal. I'm not gonna, even me not being a big multiplayer guy, it was abysmal. It was not the greatest. I was not a fan of it. The game was already a bit buggy, so putting that into multiplayer, that's gonna be fun. You had that kind of situation. I feel like some of the characters introduced were very nice, but a lot of them were behind walls of limited times, or you had to do certain things to get codes to get the characters, and I thought it was just bad. I didn't like it. But you did get Alex Brand as a multiplayer character, so that was good. So, you know, Judgment had that going for it. Then you have 5, which had the full shebang Gears. It had all the characters you could ever want. Honestly, Gears 5, I'll even admit, people have their saying of how they feel about multiplayer in general with Gears of War. I think 5 was perfectly fine. Out of all the multiplayers I ever played, I feel like 4 and 5 I get behind the most and I enjoy myself with more. I don't have a negative view for their multiplayer, but yeah, it's really cut and dry for this. Like, they just had better multiplayer. They had a full enemies and allies, blue, red, which they had blue and red too over in Judgment, but it was still all human. And it just worked. I just can't see a negative if you compare that to Judgment. Now, if you compare it to other games in the franchise, there's takeaways and drawbacks. But if we're comparing it to Judgment, yes, it is a better multiplayer by an exuberant amount. Coming up from that, we have game modes. So there were different game modes that were introduced in both of these games. For instance, in Judgment, they did not have a Horde mode, but they did have something called Overrun, which was pretty nice. It was like Horde mode, except basically like defending. And honestly, a lot of people like Overrun. I like Overrun a lot. I thought it was really good, especially, like, it gave birth to the original style of, like, the class system 4 and 5 would pick up, and it was nice. It felt refreshing. You know, you had Baird going around as the mechanic with his little blowtorch fixing things. It was fun. You fought off everything to keep the generators and other stuff running. I thought it was good. I thought it was really nice. Then you have over on the 5 side of things, they did have Horde. They also had Escape. Escape was basically going in with a suicide mission, and once you set off the venom bombs, you had to run your way out of there and hope you can live and get out. That I really like too. I really like Escape and I really like Overrun. I thought they were really, really good modes. Now, I still have to give this to 5, however, because of the fact that you do still get Horde mode in 5. I mean, Horde is a staple in Gears of War. The fact that you didn't have it in Judgment, I understand. I get why you couldn't do it. But it's just that Man, it would have been nice to have Horde mode. It would have been wonky as ever with Judgement style, but man, it would have been something. Just to have it again. Honestly, if I had to put Overrun compared to Escape, they're like neck and neck. I really can't make a decision between the two, so that's where Horde kind of is the tiebreaker. So, because of Horde mode, I have to give it a Gears 5 just because it's tried and true. Yeah, they make a lot of changes to Horde, but I like Horde no matter what it is. I enjoy it. I enjoy Overrun. I enjoy Escape. I don't have anything negative about any of those. I think they're both perfectly fine. It's just Gears 5 just offers more of that, and it is a pretty enjoyable experience. This one is the bane of my existence to talk about, but then we have the situation where it comes to each game when it comes to their stores or their DLC for getting outside content from the main game. This one immediately goes to Judgement. I am sorry. The biggest piss-poor excuse for a store I ever saw in my life was from Gears 5. It is horrible. For anyone who doesn't know, we touched on this last week when we were talking about guest characters, but when we were talking about the guest characters and how that came to be purchasing them, to get 2 characters, a flag, and an insignia, $20 you're going to have to shell out. There was an item in-game, not even a gesture, it was an execution that already existed in-game that was for another weapon that they were selling for a different weapon altogether. $8 you had to shell out for something that already existed in-game, but you just got it for a different gun. Give us $8, almost 10 clams, just to get an execution. It's piss poor. And I believe their store is still not the greatest, but they fixed a lot of stuff and made a lot of things free. But that doesn't excuse how it started. At least with Judgement, hey, you're paying this much money to get some map packs, and if you want to get a character here or there, like they're pre-order, like not even pre-order, but exuberant different ways you gotta go and get them. Hey, here's the thing. I'd much rather hunt down and try those methods, like getting a code from Beef Jerky to get Tribal Tie, instead of paying $20 to get 2 character skins. The jerky is going to be cheaper than buying 2 characters. I could buy 2 bags of jerky probably back when the game first came out, probably less for $20. Again, jerky's expensive as ever. That's a pet peeve of mine in general for life. But back then, I think 2011, I believe. Yeah, I can get 2 things of jerky probably cheaper. Yeah, I gotta give it a Judgement. At least they understood how a store should function instead of trying to rip off everyone who came through wanting just a different gesture, emote, execution, skins, flags. Yeah, Judgment's got it beat. I'm sorry, you can screw off Gears 5 store. The visuals. So, when it comes to the visual aspect of these games, this was really, really, really difficult because of the fact that when Judgement first came out, the biggest thing they were banking on and selling was their visuals to the game, how the game looked, kind of that orangish hue to things. You had things like the fire in the beginning, that tree that was on fire that illuminated everything and the shadows were dancing off of it. You had the when you went to the island, you could overlook Halvo Bay and like a krill storm was forming over it. It all looked very good. Visually wise, it's a very good game. I like it a lot. When it comes to 5, we're talking new age, new systems, new tech. All of that goes into making their visuals, and they are very good visuals. This is a very recent game, and Gears is very good at focusing on their visuals. Like with their newer, after 2 came out, they amped up visuals through the roof, and it looks very nice. Gears 5 is very good. Seeing the Riftworm skeleton in the village, I liked it. I think it looked very good. I like the cutscenes. I think they look very clean. If I had to compare both of them, I had to think about it. I sat down. This was the hardest one for me to decide. I had to put it down as just them being equal. I couldn't decide. I can't decide one way or the other because you're putting 5, which is the newest style of everything, the newest upgraded systems for making it look perfect, comparing that to Judgement, which came out a decade prior. But it's the fact that Judgment's visuals hold up so well. They're such good visuals for when it came out. I have to put them on the same tier. Now, I don't think either of them have the best visuals in the entire franchise in general. If I had to give it to that, I would give it to Gears Hivebusters. Now, yes, I know it's in Gears 5, but they amped up visuals on that one even past the main game. Hivebusters probably has the best visuals out of all of them, and then it would probably go 5 and Judgement going back to back, and then under that I'd probably give it to 4. But yeah, I can't break them apart. It's an even one. I mean, the fact that you have Judgement looking so good by today's standards to 5, it's even. It's completely even to me. From the visuals, we jump over into gameplay. Now with gameplay, this is where players put the controller in their hand, they're playing it, it's the feel of how the game works and, how to fire, shoot, reload, swap weapons, movement, roadie runs. It's all about how it feels for that gameplay. And I have to say, it goes to 5 because of the fact that Gears 5 at least lets you carry more than 2 weapons on hand, and it's not really that bugged to oblivion sometimes. I know the bugs are their own thing, but yeah, it affects gameplay too when it comes to some of those bugs. 5 is just good. It feels clean when you play it. Like, there are times where, like, you might have an issue with something, or like that's an in-game problem, but that doesn't affect how the game feels when you're controlling and moving things. It feels very crisp and clean. When it comes to Judgment, I won't lie, it does not feel that crisp and clean. It really does feel like, hey, here's some basic controls to get you through and playing. Good luck from here, we'll see you at the end. When it comes to 5, it does feel like they tweaked, they played around with the game mechanics and everything, and it feels very good. The gameplay is very nice. It's very straight on. When you're playing and looking forward and playing through, going through the levels, it feels very nice. It feels very like you're traveling. It is a very linear path in Gears of War Judgment, which is not anyone's fault. It was made to be a linear game, but you really get that feeling of like you have to keep going forward. Well, you have a lot more option, a lot more room to move around, and a lot more of like the world was put together. The gameplay works well with how the game was made. So I do have to give that one to 5. It was very well done. They just need to make open world a little bit better, and I think they could really have a gem on their hands with that one. To finish all of this off, we're going to talk about the extra content that comes for both of these games. These are some of the only Gears games that have extra content. Now, when it comes to Judgment, we have Aftermath. Now, Aftermath is more of you kind of earn it to play the ending, but then you have Hivebusters over on Gears 5, which is a full DLC you have to pay for, which that actually has a reasonable price because of how good it is. So comparing these two for which one is kind of better to go along with, like, hey, this one may not have the superior gameplay or length, but it is basically free. Then you have Hivebusters where it's like, hey, we're really, really good with what you're going to be playing, but you still have to pay for it. I kind of have to give it to Hivebusters. Because of the fact that Aftermath was great, I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed going through and learning what happened to our characters. It's 17 years after E-Day, or the events in general of Halvo Bay. It was very nice. It was nice to see how everyone was doing. You see Paddock is still in Halvo Bay. That one blew my mind the first time I played. I'm like, you didn't leave? You had 17 years, why didn't you go anywhere? That was fun. I enjoyed it. The story wrapped up well. It really does fill in why Barrick and Cole are gone for like a fifth to 2/5 of the original Gears of War 3. So I feel it really puts it in there and makes it feel really nice and mesh well. They go and get what they're looking for there, and then they leave and they make their way to the ending of Gears of War 3. I think it works really well. I think it's very clever for what they were doing. But then you get Hivebusters, and Hivebusters is an experience all on its own. I love Hivebusters. When I'm ranking the games, when I release the game ranks, I'm going to release a tier list showing where all of them stand someday. When I release that, here's the thing. I put DLCs as their own thing. I have, and I'll say it out right now so everyone knows, I have Hivebusters above 5. Hivebusters on its own as a DLC, a single act length of a game, is superior to the entire game of Gears 5. If you had to put them next to each other, I'd easily say Hivebusters is better. Hivebusters is better than 5, Judgment, it's just better. I love Hivebusters. The story is great. The characters are great. They took a full step back from what was going in 5, did something different, and it worked out marvelously. So I have to kind of give it to Hivebusters. It's just superior to these two base games in general. Aftermath is great, but Hivebusters is excellent. I'm sorry. We're getting like, entrees over here and everything. We're getting the goddamn main dish right over here. So yeah, I have to give it to Hivebusters. Great game. That's a score in the point for 5. Tallying up everything and seeing what we got here, it does end up that 5, at least for the points I'm bringing up, is still better than Judgment by like barely a little bit. Like Hivebusters DLC is basically the thing that saves it. If they never released that DLC, I think Judgment would have finally been dethroned as the worst of like the Gears games. But right now Judgment still holds it. And again, these games aren't bad games or anything like that. They're good games. I enjoy these games. I like these games. 5 really irks me sometimes, and some of the bugs won't make me throw a controller for Judgment, but they are good games. I enjoy these games. As games on their own and not Gears games, they are very good games. I would recommend these games. Yes, I would recommend Judgment for someone to play. I would recommend 5 for someone to play. They are nice games, and they really do tell a good story, and you get the characters very well, even if I hate some of them, like Kate. So that's going to do it. I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. This is just a little fun one I really wanted to do, because I thought about it. I was at work, and I was like, you know, I really don't like 5, but Judgment's considered to be the worst. Man, I don't know which is worse right now, so I had to think about it, and Judgment still has some problems that puts it behind the pack, but it's still a fun experience. So I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. Thank the patrons for making this possible. I will see you guys later on in other videos or another Gear Talk where we'll talk about some more fun, amazing things in Gears of War. I love you all to death. Later!